May I remind everyone that when Mr. Mandela is on stage, no flash photography, please. And that includes members of the audience. It's a long-standing rule, and I hope we don't have to repeat it again. Thank you. Could we ask the photographic media to join us?
The beautiful melodies there of Imilonji Kantu, quite a long history running there. The wife of the founder of the choir for a long time was the personal assistant of President Nelson Mandela. And as we saw the footage just coming up, the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Mr. Ahmed Dangur, was going up to speak. Several activities will take place in there as we go along until we get to that time at 3:30 Central African time when the President of Liberia addresses the meeting. Let's go back into the auditorium.
We might send the Mbongi down and come and confiscate the cameras.
mini beswajongile athile kumandla ilahlekile qalani sizwe libonakele yele yonke into enkulu didinke buqopho kumachaphaza egolide libiziwe bathenjini ihambe elirhangahanga lakwamandela ithole lenkunzi zomgquba into yamithi iminyaka yamibini ingazalwa yaze yazalwa seyinamazinyo kanti izawuphila ubomi idiba umgangathe xa kunamhlanje idla ibhaso lesibini yaloo nto sisithi ngolo hlobo halala madiba halala zulumangeliinglatoni zonke izizwe zehlabathi ziyamrhalela zonke izizwe zeafrika ziyamrhalela ngobucolo bengqondo yalawo amadoda makhulonke yalawo amadoda kuqanda labathembu lakamthikaka lakajonga lakavelebembenkele lakayemyemi yalawo kudalfunga nakonke amadoda inkokheli eyaziwayo esizweni bathethile abantu behlabathi bonke basithi Nelson Mandela is the root of the reconciliation, the stem of our society, the filament of freedom, the daily self-consciousness, the corona of Jesus.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media. Could I ask you, please, to leave us now? Thank you, gentlemen and ladies, so that we can give our guests an unobscured view. Thank you very much.
Wow, what a beautiful sight. Well, people of the media being asked to leave the room. Just following that beautiful rendition by Zolani Mkiva, with this beautiful garb of the African map embroidered on his garb. There's the birthday boy, smiling all the way.
Let's go, guys, let's go.
Sing two anthems. Last night we heard a singer from Liberia, Miata Fanbula, sing for a dinner, and I don't think the guests there were the same after she had finished. She will now sing the Liberian anthem first.
Shalom.
Ladies and
As
gentlemen,
you
I
heard
wondered
there,
if we could just...
the beautiful sounds of Mieta Fanbule, a renowned Liberian singer, rendering the Liberian anthem, and also the South African anthem, accompanied by Umlonji Kantu. A moment of silence for now. That moment of silence for a fallen hero in South Africa, John Dlantla, a visibly shaken President Thabo Mbeki speaking at his funeral today.
Privilege to welcome you on behalf of the Nelson Mandela Foundation to the 6th Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture. The annual lecture had become something of the flagship event in the programs of the foundation. We had the honor of hosting as speakers the influential and important voices of former United States President Bill Clinton, Nobel Peace Laureate Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Professor Wangari Maathai, another Nobel Peace Laureate, South African President Thabo Mbeki, and yet another Peace Laureate in former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan. A major aim of the Nelson Mandela Foundation is to facilitate, promote, and contribute to the public conversation and debate nationally, continentally, and globally. We trust that the annual lectures had in fact done so, and we thank you for joining us at these occasions. This year's lecture has the further significance that it occurs in the year in which Nelson Mandela turns 90. There are a number of events arranged locally and internationally marking Mr. Mandela's turn of decade. For the Nelson Mandela Foundation, this annual lecture is the official celebration of 90 years of a most remarkable life, and we are grateful to all of you for participating in the event this afternoon. 6 more days to go to the arrival of that magical day when he actually turns 90. And what a life, one that spanned the greater part of the momentous 20th century and into the start of the 21st century and the 3rd millennium. And a life that not merely marked time through those historic years and decades, but one that made history, that formed and shaped historic events, and a life that inspired and whose legacy will continue to inspire generations to come throughout the world. And it is that world historical figure whom I now have the honor of inviting briefly to address this congregation.
President Johnson-Sirleaf, distinguished guests, friends, ladies and gentlemen, we have for years remarked about people coming to such events primarily to see what an old man looks like, to see a 90-year-old in real life must surely be an irresistible temptation. But thank you very much for being here. Your warmth and friendship are much appreciated. We feel privileged to celebrate with so many friends and well-wishers. As the years progress, one increasingly realizes the importance of friendship and human solidarity. And if a 90-year-old may offer some unsolicited advice on this occasion, it would be that you, irrespective of your age, should place human solidarity as a concern for the other at the center of the values by which you live. There is still too much discord, hatred, division, conflict, and violence in our world here at the beginning of the 21st century. A fundamental concern for others in our individual and community lives would go a long way in making the world a better place we so passionately dreamt of. I thank you once more for honoring an old man with your presence. And I thank particularly President Johnson-Sirleaf for agreeing to deliver this lecture. You are an inspiring example to Africa and the world as one who strives for peace where others seek to fight and destroy. It is so easy to break down and destroy. The heroes are those who make peace and build. We salute you for your courageous example. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, and we now invite President Johnson-Sirleaf to address us.
Thank you. Thank you. Our revered President Mandela, our sister, Gracia Michelle, Excellencies, members of the Diplomatic Corps, officials of the South African government, the acting mayor and officials of Soweto, representatives of international organizations, academicians, my fellow Liberians, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. What an honor to be standing before you, to be standing before His Excellency, President Nelson Mandela, to deliver the 6th annual Nelson Mandela Lecture here at Walter Sisulu Square in Kliptown, Soweto. What an honor to follow all the many sterling persons who have given this lecture before me. President Mandela, on the occasion of your 90th birthday, I would like to pay tribute to you. A man who has paved the way for a new generation of leaders and the emergence of democratization in Africa. Where through free and fair elections or other processes, authority is transferred peacefully from one civilian government to another, where issues and hope, not fear for the future, define the national debate, where equality of women is a right and women's agencies supported and utilized, where governments invest in basic services like health and education, where there's respect for individual and human rights, where there's a vibrant and open media, where economic growth is driven by entrepreneurs in the private sector, where open markets and trade define interactions with traditional donor nations, and finally, more importantly, where leaders are accountable to their people. We admire you, President Mandela, for returning justice and democracy to your country, South Africa, and in doing so, for becoming an aspiration for Africans and for peoples the world over. You have taught us that if one believes in compassion for humanity, we can all make a difference. South Africa is a young democracy that has set a high standard for the continent in terms of its focus on constitutionalism, human rights, and democracy. In preparation for its democracy, South Africa made strides in institution creation, including enshrining a constitution with an ambitious and far-reaching human rights agenda, and establishing the Chapter 9 institutions, namely the Human Rights Commission, Youth Commission, and Gender Commission. As part of the democratic process, South Africa strengthened the media and ensured freedom of information. This country, your country, has led the way in establishing principles for an effective parliament, a fair and transparent judiciary, and a transformed legal system. Many Africans draw on the South African experience to infuse thinking about our present and our future. There has been a long history of engagement in African institutional fora that seek to craft a more positive future for our continent. South Africa has contributed to this effort in no small measure. We thank you, President Mandela, for your foresight and your leadership in providing the stewardship to that process, much of which was achieved through collective effort and built on years of sacrifice and yearning. Our physical presence in Kliptown is also remarkable. When in 1955, the Freedom Charter proclaimed a bold development manifesto for South Africa and confirmed that the benefits were to be shared by all who live in South Africa, it set a remarkably high standard for the government and people of this country. At that time, Kliptown was described as dusty and windy, but look at it now. Soweto itself brings both tears and joy, the many lives lost and the many shining lives. For example, Setsi Mashini, a leader of the critical student demonstrations who fled and found safety in my country, Liberia, and married one of my compatriots. Who sadly died before he could see this marvelous time. Soweto has a special meaning for the young people of Liberia, some of them now old, for it inspired them in countless ways. What is more, Soweto has a special meaning for Africa, for here, in this place, two giants of Africa, two pillars of the African struggle, yourself, President Mandela, and the loved Archbishop Tutu, lived on the same street, worked and raised your families here, and became Nobel laureates. Symbolizing the victory of your struggle. Dear friends, 10 years ago, in his landmark speech in 1998 at the African Renaissance Conference in Johannesburg, then Executive Deputy President Thabo Mbeki called for a revival of the African Renaissance, a renewal of the African spirit, the ushering in of the threshold of a new era. In doing so, he stood on the shoulders of many others, women and men, who dreamed and worked for this in years gone by. He said, and I quote, "The beginning of our rebirth as a continent must be our own discovering of our soul, captured and made permanently available in the great works of creativity represented by the pyramids and the Sphinx of Egypt, the stone buildings of Axiom, the ruins of Carthage and Zimbabwe, the rock paintings of the sun, the Benin bronzes and the African masks, the rock paintings, the coverings of the Makondas and the stone sculptures of the Shona. A people capable of such creativity must be its own liberator from the conditions which seek to describe our continent and its people as a poverty-stricken and disease-ridden primitives in a world riding the crest of a wave of progress and human upliftment. It has been a long and tortuous road toward that revival. From the destroyed kingdoms of Mali and Hossa, in Yoruba and Benin in the west, Bantu in the center, Zimbabwe and Monopolapa in the south, from the slave trade and the balkanization of colonialism, from the liberation struggles of Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Toure, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, Jomo Kenyatta, and you, Madiba, from the boom of the 60s and the bust of the 80s to the sobering and challenging time of today. But I do believe that a new Africa is unfolding before our eyes. The African Renaissance is now at hand. It is within our reach. It is embedded within the honest and seeking minds of the young, the professionals, the activists, the believers in our continent. Difficulties remain, no doubt. Trouble spots abound, for sure. And many seek to discredit this process, but we have reached the threshold, and there's no turning back from the irreversible transformation. Let me recall the essential elements of this transformation. The meaningful African effort to remove from dream to reality, to relegate to history the legacies of patronage, corruption, lawlessness, and underdevelopment. Collectively, as a continent, there are three major systemic changes in our body politic that will give rise to this transformation. First, we require much stronger economic management. Second, the resolution of the debt crisis and the changing relationship with our international partners. And third, the shift to democratic and accountable governance. In the 1980s, almost every sub-Saharan African country faced an economic crisis of one form or another, with high rates of inflation, large budget deficits, and growing trade gaps. These macroeconomic problems are now distant memories for most of our countries. With a few unfortunate exceptions, countries have shifted to much stronger economic policies. Inflation has been kept to single digits. Foreign exchange reserves have increased significantly. Budget and trade deficits are much smaller than they were in the past. And African countries have created a more conducive environment to encourage private sector participation and stimulate investment, including foreign direct investment. Many countries have embarked on policies that aim at economic diversification. As a result, Africa's economic growth has averaged more than 5% annually over the past 5 years. And for more than half of African countries, this renaissance has continued for more than a decade. This faster growth is not yet fast enough, and it is insufficient to effectively combat poverty in many of our countries. But we've got to agree that it is a good start. It is enough to begin to raise per capita income and purchasing power, and far exceeds the zero growth of the past decade. The second big change is the end of the 3-decade-old debt crisis. Debt began to grow in the late 1970s and the early 1980s, following, as we have today, the rapid rise in the price of oil and other commodities. This was made all the worse by government mismanagement. The creditors themselves were a big part of this problem, lending too early large amounts of money to unaccountable dictators who misused and misappropriated those funds, leaving the mess for the next generation to clean up. Accumulated interest from unserviced debt compounded the problem. The resolution of the 1980 debt crisis has proceeded slowly in distinct stages over the past 20 years. Today, 33 countries have qualified for the first stage of debt write-down, and 23 of these have completed the process, leading to a reduction of nearly $100 billion in debt. The end of the debt crisis means that improved financial conditions will enable government to increase spending on health, education, infrastructure, and civil service wages. But perhaps more importantly, it also means more independence, ownership, and economic management capacity by government authorities who can spend less time negotiating all loans with demanding creditors such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. It has opened the door to defining a new relationship between Africa and its partners, based less on old conditionalities and more on strong African leadership, trust, and mutual accountability. The ability of African governments to go beyond, to start to issue their own paper, their own country-backed bonds, will provide access to more diversified sources of development capital. The third transformation is political change, the establishment of accountable, transparent, and democratic systems of government. Sometimes we forget that in 1989, there were very few democracies in all of sub-Saharan Africa. In 1990, Namibia's liberation set the pace for Southern Africa, followed by South Africa, then Lesotho, Mozambique. It has spread slowly across the continent, uneasily to be sure, and with some reversals, but undeniably reaching many other countries, including my own. There are today over 20 democracies in sub-Saharan Africa. Consider the transformation. In the space of a generation, democracy in Africa has spread from a very few countries to more than 1/3 of the continent. Some of these are nascent democracies that are still fragile. But for others, the change more clearly prevails. It is hard to predict the future, and the change will not be easy or smooth in every country. But never before in world history have so many low-income countries become democracies in so short a period of time. Never before has the resolve of African leaders, backed by needed and judiciously used military intervention, ended a rebellion against an elected government in power, as was recently done in the Comoros. This enormous change, engendered by an empowered citizenry, has huge implications for Africa and for those few countries that continue to frustrate the will of the people. This new Africa is being built every day by the African people, people who reach out across boundaries, real and imagined. They are not waiting for the Renaissance to be determined by states and by governments alone, for they know that they are part of an interconnected world. And now, let me talk a little bit about the country that I love, Liberia. It represents a case study of both Africa's terrible tragedy of the past and the recent resurgence of hope. For the past 2 decades, the world came to know Liberia as a land of political comedy, widespread corruption, and unimaginable brutality. Liberia became that strange footage that flickered on television screen with terrible images of savagery. The Liberian people became refugees and fled to all corners of the globe for shelter. It was a period of darkness and insanity. Today, the signs of recovery are clear. We are reopening our mines, forestry, and oil palm plantations, replanting our rubber, reconstructing our roads and schools and clinics, and restoring lights and water. Women are being recognized as the agents of the kind of change we must have, as they were the first to call for peace. Our children are once again in their smart uniforms on the way to school. Storefronts are open and restocked, and petty traders fill the streets and the waysides. Families are repairing homes, and construction projects are sprouting throughout the country. Our debt relief program is well on the way, and economic growth is nearing double digits. In addition, our government has taken strong action to combat the scourge of corruption. It is our fervent belief that anyone who uses state power to steer public resources to his or her personal benefit must be held accountable. We are not engaged in this process as merely a gimmick. We are doing it because we are convinced that rampant corruption is one of the key reasons why Africa is unable to deliver basic social services to its people. It is our firm conviction that Africa, indeed Liberia, is not poor, but rather poorly managed. Corruption, exploitation, and the misuse of Africa's resources are central to the inability of African governments to ably and sufficiently respond to the needs of the African people. In Liberia, we want to end that, and our anti-corruption campaign is a measure in that direction, and we are beginning to see results. According to the World Bank Institute, in 2004, Liberia ranked 190th out of 206 countries on the Control of Corruption Index, one of the worst rankings in the world. In 2006, our ranking jumped to 145th. And in 2007, we moved up to 113. In 3 years, we have moved up 73 places. I'm not yet satisfied. Corruption is still there, but I'm pleased that our efforts are beginning to pay off. Yes, Liberia is on the rebound, yet we know that the challenge that remains is enormous. We recognize that to be successful, we need to implement policies aimed at both stability, political stability, and economic recovery that are mutually reinforcing. We also know that to sustain development over time, we have to build institutions and invest in human capacity. We are equally aware that for Liberia to be successful, we cannot simply recreate the institutions and political structures of the past that led to widespread income disparities, economic and political marginalization, and deep social cleavages. We know that we must create economic and political opportunities for all Liberians, and not just for a small elite class, and ensure that the benefits from growth are spread more equitably throughout the population. We know that we must decentralize political structures, provide more political power to the regions and districts, build accountability and transparency into government decision-making, and create stronger systems of checks and balances across the 3 branches of government. In the short term, we must meet the current crisis of high commodity prices and widespread youth unemployment that threaten to wipe out the gains that we have achieved. We know that despite the obstacles and strong resistance to change, despite the risks implied, we must stay the course of reform. Although primarily responsible, we also know that we cannot do this alone, and we ask for the continued support, good wishes, and care of all of you who are here in this room. President Mandela, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm all too aware that the African Renaissance could come for some and not for others. But that does not have to happen. As President Mandela remarked in London on the occasion of his 90th birthday, our work is far from over. There is much that remains to be done in the fight against injustice. We must never forget that the Renaissance calls for a better distribution of the benefits of economic growth, that opportunities must be made equal to enable more Africans to rise above absolute poverty, that more of the poor should have access to health and education, to clean water and electricity and housing. We must never forget the hundreds of thousands of people, primarily women and children, who continue to die from physical assault and starvation in Darfur. We must never forget the forgotten people of Somalia, who are made victims of violence among competing warring factions and political interests. As I stand before you today, I would be remiss if I did not express my solidarity with the people of Zimbabwe. As they search for solutions to the crisis in their country. I recognize my limitations to express views on Zimbabwe. After all, Liberia is in West Africa. Liberia is a country of only 3.4 million people. We are thousands of miles away from the realities of Southern African politics. Liberia did not suffer under British colonial rule, nor do we have the same challenges with land distribution that has created so much internal turmoil. But I am, I hope, part of the new Africa. An Africa rooted in many of the values demonstrated by you, President Mandela. In that Africa, all Africans have responsibility for our collective future. It is therefore mine and our responsibility to speak out against injustice anywhere. This is why on June 30, in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, on the occasion of the 13th Ordinary Session of the African Union, I, along with several other African leaders, spoke out and appealed to colleagues to denounce the runoff election in Zimbabwe. I explained the Liberian experience. In 1985, Liberia held a sham election that was endorsed by Africa and the world. 30 years of civil war and devastation followed, with thousands dead and millions displaced. It need not have happened. We cannot lose sight of the fact that we in Africa do not have the luxury to enclose ourselves in our respective political enclaves. Our national policy process must recognize and be cognizant of the region in which we find ourselves. This is why it is important. It is an imperative that our national public policy processes take into account what is happening in other places by reflecting our regional and continental conditions. In Liberia, we know all too well that the war conditions in our country were exported to the region, and still today, the region continues to suffer as a result. This is why we continue to be concerned about developments in the region. No matter what progress we make in Liberia, if Guinea and Cote d'Ivoire and Sierra Leone are not settled, Liberia will not be settled. Similarly, here in Southern Africa, until the situation in Zimbabwe is resolved, the entire region will feel the effects of instability, and a dream of democratic and accountable government will remain unfulfilled. President Mbeki, as then chairman of the Organization of African Unity, was instrumental in putting Liberia on the road to peace. We thank him. And we pray that he will do the same for Zimbabwe. President Mandela, I'm often asked what I think my legacy will be. And I reply that it's for historians to decide. But it is my hope that when history passes judgment on me, it will not just remark that I was the first democratically elected woman president in Africa. Although I do believe, I am convinced that women's leadership can change the world. I would like to be remembered for raising the bar for accountable governance in Liberia and across the continent, for designing institutions that serve the public interest, for turning a failed state into a thriving democracy with a vibrant, diversified, private sector-driven economy, for bringing safety and voice to women, for sending children back to school, for returning basic services to the cities and extending them to rural areas. My primary challenge then is to create the institutions that will stand the test of time, that will be there for my grandchildren's grandchildren. For too long, those watching Africa have focused on personalities, relying on one person, too often one man, to lead the way. But this mentality has failed Africa, undermining accountability and constitutionally defined government. If we were to expand this to Africa as a continent, there is much to be done to ensure that we have Pan-African institutions for dialogue, problem solving, and vision setting and programmatic delivery. We need to build regional programs that provide a platform for intellectual engagement and civic participation that can unlock the potential of all sectors of society. Let us together reignite a Pan-African consciousness and awareness that draws on roots and tradition, but is updated and made relevant to today's Africa. At a practical level, if we can approach our negotiations with development partners from a consolidated position, we stand a better chance to improve our investment and trade regimes. The proud history of South Africa's trade union activism, using collective strength and voice, can be used on a larger scales elsewhere. We can strengthen our development program for Africa based on values such as citizenship, participation and democracy, gender equality, social justice, integrity, ethics, and human rights if we work together. When you won the elections, President Mandela, dreams were born. African dreams of the end of the exploitation of the past. They dreamed of having dignified economic opportunities to provide for their families. They dreamed of sending their children to decent schools. They dreamed of an end to gender disparities. They dreamed of competent governments that were accountable to the people. They dreamed of national reconciliation and national unity. And they dreamed of living in peace and security with their neighbors. If someday I am remembered as one of the many dreamers who came in your wake, who, unable to fill your shoes, walked in your shadow, to build a new Africa that I can think of no other place to be in history. I can think of no better way to be remembered than one of those dreamers who, following President Mandela, said with confidence that the African Renaissance, the new Africa, is at hand. President Mandela, we salute you and your legacy. Happy birthday.
Madam President, can I, on behalf of all of us here and all of those who've heard the broadcast, say thank you very much. Thank you very much in the first place for accepting our invitation to give the Nelson Mandela annual lecture, and you've certainly added to the luster that this series had built up. But thank you very much for your words. We are nationally and in the region going through something of a bit of a national depression for a variety of reasons. Thank you very much for reminding us as a country and a nation of our achievements and inspiring us again to live up to those achievements and those promises of our transition and our change. And thank you very much for reminding us of the progress in our continent. It's not good times in the world. There's global economy going down and people tend to be negative about many things. Your positive spirit, your words, and the example of what you and your people are doing in Liberia must certainly inspire us, and through that, add to what we try to achieve through this lecture series. Thank you very much, and good luck in your country.
Ladies and gentlemen, one of the things I probably neglected to mention, a very trivial thing, but for those of you who are a bit chilly, there are blankets in your bags. I was alerted to this a little earlier on. Earlier this week, the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, in keeping with the theme that Madam President enunciated on today, convened regional parliaments of young people who deliberated on the challenges facing Africa. And this afternoon, we want to invite two of them, Mashurum Pashla and Tabu Ramen, to present some of their findings to us, to Madiba, and to the President of Liberia.
Pleasant afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Mashurum Patha is my name. I'm representing the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund Regional Youth Parliament. On the 9th of July, the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund hosted its first Youth Parliament. Presentations by 6, including South Africa, were made by children who have gathered for a period of 2 days to deliberate on the national issues that affect them and their peers. The gathering was a culmination of the national meetings in their respective countries, where young people identified issues that affect them. Issues that affect children are not issues that children are raising are not different from adult issues. It is how they impact on the lives of children and their ability to enjoy their childhood. Each time there's a conflict in a country, children are most affected, either as child soldiers or displaced people who then lose out on schooling and general development. Most children do not get opportunities to do what their counterparts are doing in developed countries, such as engaging in creative and innovative programs, which allows them to develop skills in different spheres of life. The government of Africa needs to create an environment that is friendly to children and supportive to their initiatives, to ensure that the democratic values are promoted for good leadership, following the footsteps of great leaders such as Mr. Mandela, Mr. Nkrumah, Mr. Marshall, and our first female president with us today, President Ellen Johnson-Sirleaf. Ladies and gentlemen, we as the youth parliamentarians of Southern Africa have chosen to take the responsibilities The responsibilities to speak for those who can't be heard. The responsibilities to speak for those who do not have the power to speak. We shall strive for unity, to build Ubuntu and the spirit of togetherness. While we do all, we can build child-friendly leadership with pride and understanding of an African child. We stand proud today, proving hopeless people wrong, that we are not the lost generation. As you can see, we are the future leaders who see beyond what's visible. We want to see every child being exposed to opportunities that enrich their lives. Our vision is for all children to not only understand and act upon the rights, but to take responsibilities for their own futures and reach a point where they see challenges as opportunities and stepping stones towards building character, enhancing leadership qualities, and shaping their future. Just imagine how unique, how beautiful will our country, our region, and our continent be. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. My name is Thabo Ramaine. I'm from the Youth Parliament. Now, as parliamentarians, we have goals and objectives. Now, our objectives are to build a child-friendly leadership among the society we are living in, to improve child participation at home, schools, and within the community, to build self-image, self-esteem, self-worth within the civic participation. Now, as Nelson Mandela Children's Fund legacy states, we want to change the way the society treats its children and youth. To build a nation born of true love, build unity and humanity. To improve the structure of learning in schools in a way that learners can be taught the values and qualities of education and values of life that they could understand and act upon them. To improve the teaching of cultural values, that is identity, customs, human, political, and African consciousness. Now, how do we see ourselves doing this? By building a child-friendly leadership, we recommend that our leaders should realize that every step they take affects a child. So having a child participation in decision-making will build a relationship between child-friendly leadership and child participation. By influencing the society to change negative attitude towards children and youth, they should interact with one another in order to find solutions. By coming together as a community, solving problems affecting both old and young people. By learning the values of life, educators, children, and the parents should meet in a way that they bring the structures and come up with strategies of teaching people about values of education, life, and culture, including customs, identity, human development, human, political, African consciousness. Because we must be linked between consciousness and super-consciousness. Now, as we Africans, let us be alive with possibility. Thank you very much.
Well, with this generation emerging, I am certain the leaders, whoever they are not going to sit easily and be complacent. Madam President has kindly agreed to respond to what these two young people have presented to us.
I am sure that everyone in this audience and everyone listening to the talks today will agree that the future of our continent, the future of each of our country, will rest in the hands of the youth represented by these two here today. And this is why we have an obligation and a responsibility as family, as teachers, as leaders, to provide for them, first, a quality education, the skills that will enable them to achieve their professional goals in life, that will prepare them to take the leadership, to be able to exercise it in an environment that we help to promote, an environment of peace, stability, accountability, hard work, honesty, and the exercise of all the freedoms and rights that we know they so rightfully deserve. I am so glad for the Youth Parliament. I'm glad that you all participate in it. I'm glad that you already have begun to participate in the workings of the body politic, and that you are ready, even as youth, to contribute your share to nation building and the renewal of our continent. Thank you, and carry the message to others.
All right. The young people would just like to thank you.